Welcome back to the Fourth Way Podcast. In the last episode, I talked a bit about purpose. And we talked about the importance of finding our purpose and recognizing not only what the purpose is, but so not only what the ends are, but also the importance of living within the means, right? Playing a game within the boundaries. So I used a sports analogy last episode about how there are a lot of people who might recognize the appropriate ends, recognize the appropriate purpose, but they end up going out of bounds and not really being able to score the points because they've invalidated themselves by going out of bounds and can't come back in and play the ball. Or whatever other analogy you want to give in sports, recognizing how the importance of points, but not playing the game the right way to be able to score the points. In this episode, I'm going to change up the analogy just a little bit. So I refer to people in this episode, people who are going to recognize value, let's say, but not play by the rules. You know, I'm going to refer to some of these people as stalkers. So in the last episode, it was Christian nationalists that I kind of used as an example, where even though I agree with the values that they say with their lips, right, the importance of loving God, of following His laws, which should lead to loving others as well. But I agree with loving God and I agree with loving others. Those are great ends. But I feel like they go out of bounds on the means, trying to obtain those ends. And so if you think of these people, Christian nationalists, kind of like Pharisees, right? If you think of them as stalkers, that's gonna help us out this episode, right? So think about a stalker. I imagine you are at work and you receive this anonymous gift from someone who's been stalking you, and they've been learning all about you, right? They've been learning your favorite color. They've been learning where you like to hang out, how many kids you have, their names and birthdays, like all this information that, you know, friends would know and family would know. But like the more information they know, it's like, you know, only the closest people to you would know. Like this is kind of creepy. So you start receiving gifts from somebody who's stalking you at work. That's gonna be like really creepy. And that's how I would take a lot of this like Christian nationalism sort of thing, right? Confess God with their mouths. They know a lot about God. They know a lot about what He wants. They know about what His word said, about, you know, all this information about God. Confess Him with their mouths, yet their hearts are far from Him, right? They're seeking the ends without engaging in the means, without going through the relational process. But there's also another way that I'm going to talk about here as I kind of unpack this analogy. Another way that you can miss purpose as well. And that is, here I liken that to being a mistress. If you go back to the gift analogy at work, right? Imagine that you are at work. Imagine that you're married. You are at work, and all of a sudden you receive this really fancy, like sensual gift from a mistress that you have, from someone who you've maybe had a fling with, or maybe you've had a long affair with, like very intimate affair, and you really enjoy the affair, but you don't really want to be receiving gifts from that person at work because you need to kind of keep that under wraps. So that's really embarrassing. So both of those things, receiving gifts from stalkers and receiving gifts from mistresses at work, right, really, really not good. Like you don't want to do that. It feels weird, creepy in the one situation and embarrassing in the other. And that's because of the nature of your relationship with each of those types of people, right? You don't want any part of them other than the momentary pleasure they provide in your mistress. And for the stalker, you really don't want any part of them at all. You just want the information about them. You know, there are people who are not stalkers, but who know all kinds of information about sports figures or actors and actresses who aren't stalkers. They haven't gone that far. They haven't like gone creepy, but they know tons about this individual who knows nothing about them. So, both stalkers and mistresses, to have either of these relationships, they require systems of complexity, in a sense. The stalker has to memorize lots and lots and lots of facts. They have to do lots of research because they can't talk to the person who they're stalking. They're stalking them from a distance. Like, the reason that they're stalking them is because they don't have a relationship. But if I knew what I know about my wife now, if I knew that and I wasn't in a relationship with her, I knew her schedule, I knew like all these things, I'd be a stalker. The reason I'm not a stalker is because she shares those things with me freely, and I know those things because we're in relationship. Like, stalkers have to have these complex systems of finding facts and memorizing things because they don't have a relationship with the person. They're not learning with them by day in and day out experience. They're setting up a system for gaining knowledge that they should only have by being in relationship, right? And then mistresses, of course, a lot of times, because you have to be sneaky, there are all these elaborate meetings and lies and stories and to explain away your time away or these gifts that you get, right? This huge elaborate system is set up to kind of hide that fact. And both of these contrast very much with just a simple relationship of spending time with someone and enjoying their fellowship. So in this episode, I want to kind of jump off of that idea that I'm continuing from the last episode about, digging a little bit deeper, okay, identifying the importance of values. And yes, if simplicity is something that provides us with purpose, if it's in the grain of the universe and it's what God intended for us, then what does it look like to walk in relationship with him? And how do we fool ourselves sometimes that we are in relationship with him by being a stalker or a mistress? And what should that life look like as we pursue God? One of whose means is a simple life. So let's jump right in. The secular world often refers to Christianity as a religion. That's probably because it is, right? But a lot of Christians don't seem to like being pigeonholed that way. Since Christianity is an exclusive religion, Christians feel the need to set themselves apart from religion, from other religions. I often hear Christians respond to this idea with disdain, and they'll say something like, Christianity isn't a religion, it's a relationship. Now, the response is always well-meaning, but it's really a quip intended to rebut the modern notion that religion is merely a personal, mental, and emotional system intended to help one make their way through life, right? Like a crutch. There are hundreds of religions to choose from, and Christianity is just another, and it's just a system. But Christians feel that Christianity is so much more than that, and they want the world to know it. As I think about the popular Christian retort to Christianity being mere religion, I'm finding that it becomes more unappealing to me, this retort. And much of my dislike for the response probably lies in the way that some Christians kind of make the remark. The response is sometimes accompanied by like a self-righteous tone, and it's frequently directed towards sinners and unbelievers in what seem to be more of a smug retort than it is by Christians who are upset at being stereotyped, right? It's like those YouTube videos that say, owned, like all these apologetics videos, and they're trying to be like, apologist owns atheist. And that's kind of what it feels like to me. It feels like it's just a smug retort a lot of times. Rather than the response being really a theological or apologetic rationale for why one should be a Christian, a lot of times it's just a pointed response. When used with such a demeaning tone, I really find the quip absolutely unappealing. And even when used appropriately, though, I'm finding that I just don't like the way Christians respond. And it's not because saying that Christianity is a relationship is inaccurate, but rather that it's not very precise. Like, it conveys a true idea, but it often fails to take the unbeliever or the Christian to the proper conclusion, and sometimes I think it can actually do more harm than good. Christianity might indeed be a relationship, but relationships aren't always good, right? There are lots of kinds of relationships. And sure, there are loving relationships, but there are also adversarial relationships, love-hate relationships, relationships of dependency, stagnant relationships, opportunistic relationships, relationships of convenience, and the list could go on. Being in relationship with another simply means that you interact with them or affect them in some way. So when the Christian says that they're in relationship with God, it's important to consider the specifics of what this relationship looks like. In John 4, Jesus says that there are two primary ways in which we are to have relationship with God, in spirit and in truth. In Luke 10, we see a similar concept, where we are told to love God with all our heart, soul, strength, and mind. In both instances, it seems apparent that we have at least two ways in which we have relationship with God. One is through the mind, through contemplation and through understanding. We relate to God by knowing about God, by knowing truths and meditating on those. And at the same time, we are called to do much more than simply know about God. We are called to experience Him, to socialize with Him, to commune with Him, and to long for Him and draw near. A true relationship with God involves our minds and our souls, our thought and our experience. Unfortunately, many who claim that Christianity is a relationship fail to understand that being in a relationship with God isn't necessarily good. In fact, it can be extremely harmful. From everyone who has been given much, much will be required. To be in a relationship with God is a huge responsibility. The man who hid his talent from his master, or Judas, the betrayer of Christ who now wishes he would have never been born, or the unforgiving debtor who owed his king, they all came to a point of realization that it would have been better for them if they had never had a relationship with their masters. Being in relationship sometimes brings with it greater accountability and consequence. To have knowledge of God or experience with Him, and to disobey or reject Him, that's a very serious thing. As I'm talking right now, there are many who think that they're Christians, but are really just heaping up consequences upon themselves as they are in some sort of relationship with God, but not following His commands, not truly being in relationship. And these Christians know about God. They defend God. They study theology and apologetics. They are in an intellectual relationship with God, but they don't commune with Him. They're stalkers. They study God, dissect His words and actions, and make intellectual arguments for Him and His supremacy, but they don't know Him experientially. We're all familiar with the concept of stalkers, and generally they elicit thoughts of Hollywood and the famous. The stars often have a small group of followers who are so infatuated with them that these stalkers might send them gifts and cards, defend them vehemently on social media, purchase memorabilia and personal objects relating to the stars, study the stars, and even show up at their residence seeking to interact. The stalker relationship is creepy, and it's really a one-way relationship. There's no reciprocity. Stalkers often have an intellectual knowledge of their target to the extreme. They know their favorite colors, their schedule, their history, all sorts of minutia. But the stalker does not have social access. They have no contact. They have no experiential knowledge. The Christian stalker is the same. They study God, buy books and memorabilia about Him, show up in His churches and defend Him on social media. They honor God with their lips, but their hearts are far from Him. Others have the opposite problem. Rather than get to know God for the sum of what He reveals Himself to be, these individuals take particular experiences of God and emphasize them. Some take their experience of God's love and fail to acknowledge His wrath. They can't fathom a God who could permit the consequences of sin because they only want His warm and tender love. Some do the opposite. They may have an experience with extreme injustice in their lives, or they may have lived such a sheltered life that they never experienced significant sin in their own life or in the lives of any in their community. In both cases, the justice of God becomes the focal point, and these individuals tend towards legalism. They have little compassion or mercy for real sinners, and those on the fringes of society. They love the thought of God's justice, either because they want wrathful vengeance for the evil done to them, or because they are so removed from egregious evil that they think themselves above such sin. Though both of these individuals come to significantly different or unrelated conclusions, their reason for arriving at such conclusions are often the same. They are mistresses of God. Mistresses experience their lover in short, intense experiences. Each rendezvous likely involves an intimate encounter. There are gifts. There's stimulating conversations as the lovers catch up with what has happened since their last rendezvous. And of course, there's the intense, passionate sexual encounter. Unlike a wife who experiences all the good and the bad of her husband and chooses to live and love through both of those things, a mistress tends to only experience the good until she tries to deepen the relationship. The gifts, the conversations, and the sexual pleasure upon each encounter with her lover are all she knows. She doesn't have to work out a fair division of labor in the house, experience her lover's annoying idiosyncrasies day after day, or bear the weight of her lover's condescending remarks. The mistress doesn't have to practice forgiveness. The mistress's role is easy. She isolates the good experiences without having to put in any effort for understanding and love. Mistresses of God do the same thing. They isolate their experience of God. The warm and fuzzy Christian isolates God's love so they don't have to deal with the uncomfortable notion of his justice and wrath against them or those they love. The legalist isolates God's justice so they can either condemn those they hate or elevate themselves as better than others. When you're better than those terrible people out there, you don't have to worry about your righteousness, your standing with God, or the uncomfortable necessity of repentance. Legalism protects you from the difficulty of facing your own sin and need of a savior. The list could go on. The takeaway is that there are many today who are in relationship with God, but are only in an experiential relationship. They isolate God's actions in the world and in their lives, but refuse to know God enough so that they can accept him for all that he is. In reality, then, they don't love God for who he is. They love isolated attributes and experiences of God, like justice or compassion or something else. Now, please don't take the above as condemnation. I'm by no means saying that stalkers and mistresses can't be true Christians. I often find myself passing through life as a stalker of God, and I have been several mistresses too, as I have isolated different experiences of him at various points in my life. And even now, I'd probably say that I feel more like a stalker or a mistress than I do as a bride. The assurance of my Christianity doesn't come from avoiding the pitfalls that I've talked about so far, but rather in trusting that only Jesus can and will save a sinner like me, and seeing the fruit that ripens in my life as God convicts me of sin and leads me to repentance time and time again. As I evaluate my pendulum swing relationship, it makes me wonder about the two extremes. It seems hard to rectify what a true relationship with God is because as I learn more about him, I tend to be puffed up with arrogance and become a creepy stalker. But when I stop focusing on knowledge and experience of God's love, I become self-righteous and legalistic as I condemn others in my heart for their surface Christianity. And when I combine the two and I become a stalker/mistress, it just ends up being an arrogant, intellectual, self-righteous, legalistic follower of Christ. It doesn't seem like combining the two groups here really solves the relational problem. So what is it that makes obtaining information about someone and experiencing someone merge together into what we'd consider a healthy relationship? I think Jesus identifies the solution pretty simply. If we love him, we'll obey him. A stalker seeks information for their own benefit. They want knowledge, status, affirmation, attention, or some type of reward for what they do. Though their infatuation about the person they stalk is great, their goal is not the other person in the relationship. Likewise, a mistress seeks many of the same things. She embraces pleasure at the expense of others and puts in little relational work between her and her lover. The mistress seeks to ride the crests of pleasure, while the wife continues her experience and love even through the troughs. Both the stalker and the mistress are power positions. They're not positions of submission, and they're not positions of self-sacrificial love. To be in a truly deep relationship, that relationship must be accompanied by love. This love is a willingness to submit and sacrifice for what the other wants, which is exemplified through obedience. And this type of relationship isn't power, it isn't easy, it isn't intense all the time, it often isn't very exciting, but it grows, it fulfills, and it lasts. It's a tree which bears fruit and endures to the end. Christianity is indeed a relationship, but then again, so is pretty much everything else. If there's something or someone we come in contact with, a relationship exists. As Christians, we need to be more precise about this relationship. Churches are filled with people who stalk God or experience Him in isolation as a mistress. This will always be true. It's part of the human condition on our road to restoration. But we do a disservice to those who think they're in true relationship with God if we don't better explain what a living relationship with Him really means. You know, a lot of what we've talked about this season has really involved relationship. And I think especially of our section on diversity, and talking about the importance of relationship, of course, with other people, and just the ways that a lot of our choosing to live simply or not is going to impact others, right? Whether that's economics, the hoarding of wealth, justice in that regard, busyness and or objectification of others. Like there's just so many ways that the simple life or the complex life are going to involve our relationships with others. But, you know, rounding out this season and thinking about the purpose of life just in general, of course that, and in the last episode arguing that, you know, purpose only comes by being an instrument, by being purposed by God, then that's going to involve, of course, our relationship with God. Most of this season, we've talked about our relationship with others. Of course, in other seasons and throughout episodes, I talk about God and, you know, there are implied relationships with Him there. But specifically here, following our episode on the importance of God as the creator and purposer, it's very important not just to know about God, not just to know the ends of God, because that's what a lot of people claim to know, the ends of God, but it's also the implementation of His means. It's being in communion with Him, to know the heart of God through daily walking and experience with Him, not as a mistress who isolates certain experiences of God or certain characteristics and aspects, attributes of God, but as somebody who knows God in whole, somebody who is going to know not only the ends of God, but also the heart of God and what God really wants. And what does God want from us? What does God require of us? Right? Micah 6:8 is very famous in declaring that, right? He wants us to love justice and mercy and to walk humbly with Him. And so we have to ask ourselves, a lot of the iterations of those who claim to know the will of God, of those who know the ends of God's, what do those iterations of Christianity or religion look like? Do they reflect the heart of God? And a lot of times they don't. And we've explored a lot of complex ways in which we can kind of make that mistake to become stalkers. And hopefully this episode helps you to evaluate not only the ends, but the means as well.
That's all for now. So peace, and because I'm a pacifist, when I say it, I mean it. This podcast is a part of the Kingdom Outpost Network. Please check out the links below to find other great podcasts and content related to nonviolence and kingdom living.